all the development that's coming to the south, we're gonna force everybody back towards Highway 50. I don't think we wanna get rid of that option, yet. Maybe just have it as a study.
You're saying to take it off?
No, not take it off, but leave it as a study. So, yeah, but that may be viable with everything going to the south. That was it.
I hope those of you who had 10,000 questions are taking notes here. That was brilliant. Commissioner Sarko,
Here, and go on to.
just give it a yank.
Just pull it right out of this.
Okay, is it working?
I had it up the table. Go under here.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
They're so smart.
See that, Dick? That was under the table right there.
Yes, Alderman Spelling.
Totally unrelated, but it does have to do with traffic, because I think any more big box stores or chain restaurants and things like that is only gonna add to the congestion. Is there a way to cap? You know, we've got enough and we don't want more.
Yeah, so for big box, the most common approach is just to put a size cap on the floor area of stores at a good number of the other places I work for.
That is a very important piece.
And so, one of the recommendations in the plan is to adopt more strict architectural controls outside of the downtown. We have a lot of control in the downtown.
Because once developers come, you're stuck with whatever your ordinances say. And I think the things that we need to preserve, number one is our gateway belt. This green belt, where is it? It's been in this thing for 10 years and we haven't adopted it yet. You know, I guess I'm just saying that that's an urgent need.
Forever,
I think
that'll stop them.
it is in there, but it says it's 2020 to 2030. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. And then it's been in our comp plan for 10 years. It was in the last comp plan and we haven't taken any action on it. So if you want to control, you know, where you don't want people to be doing things, you need to take some quick action on those types of things. You need to identify where those need to be so that you're okay, you're not gonna allow someone to develop those spaces. So the Greenbelt corridor, in my mind, needs to have a quicker turnaround in the next 2 years. I think it should be a high priority for us. I think that the gateway ordinance also needs to have a quick timeline, which I would suggest 2 years. Maybe this is too aggressive, I don't know.
Well, right now, the maximum multifamily density and building size that we have using conventional zoning districts results in buildings that are too small and not dense enough to provide modern affordable housing. It can be done by planned development, and we tend to get better projects that way. But, you know, to the extent that you have to go through that process now, it is an impediment that we don't have a higher density multifamily district, because the intent historically is that part of the small city character is the smaller multifamily buildings.
Alderman Dunn?
I'll try to be brief. I don't see anything in this plan other than a little feel-good rhetoric at the beginning about preserving small-town character. I almost feel that we should just say we want to make the place comfortable for somebody who's left a suburb, and so they can come here and it'll be just like the suburb they left, and that'll be fine. The reason I say that is because I actually was born and raised here, and I remember when this was a small town with small town character, and it's disappearing rapidly, and I don't see anything here that's going to preserve it. I agree with the person who said that the green space corridors are disappearing, and what we have, remember Mr. Slavny saying that we had a master plan long before they were required, and that plan was done by local people. My father was one of them, who actually lived here and knew what the land was like and what the neighborhoods were like, what the people were like, and they developed a plan that accommodated how the town was then. And now, for instance, Mr. Slavny has said that, and this isn't his fault, that the state has now said that wetlands of 5 acres or less aren't even protected anymore. Well, you know, back when I think the original master plan was put together, people were aware of the wetlands, and for instance, they probably wouldn't have wanted to build a house on them. I think about that from time to time when I let my dog out at night and I hear the neighbor's sump pumps going off, and thinking that somewhere along the line they let people build on a wetland, and now these people have sump pumps to keep their basements dry. And back then, it's very possible that wouldn't have been allowed, but it's now just let the developer come in and build a house that's good enough so that he can make a lot of money and get out of town before all the foundation settling and the damp basements become apparent. I think the idea that we're even trying to accommodate population growth. When I grew up here, you know, a kid on a bike could probably get anywhere in town they needed to get, to the beach, to the White River, Gilmore Golf Course. You could ride a bike. It's getting bigger and bigger, and the traffic is getting more and more dangerous, and we can't. If a 10-year-old, 12-year-old can't get there on his bicycle, is it really a small town anymore? And I don't know what to do. The idea of a green belt around the city, and the city doesn't get any bigger than that, is a really good idea, especially for this town, because some of the things that make it unique as a small town are things like you can have a boat slip or a buoy, or you can go and have a beach pass. And the more people we have, free parking downtown, the more people we have, every single one of those new people are entitled to what the residents have. And you know, how many boat slips are we going to put in? Is the lake going to be largely boat slips? And the beach, how is the beach going to get bigger? And downtown, suppose everybody shows up for their 2 hours free parking downtown. How are we going to get our 1.1 million that the parking revenues contribute to reduce the taxes in this town? And I don't see in the master plan here any acknowledgement of the fact that this town is getting to be as big as it can be and still provide the quality of life that people come here for. And I don't see it. I just see accommodating slow growth or large growth.
And with this, because we're going to go through this, and in 2020, we'll park it. I know we use it as a resource, but I really think we should be more intentional moving forward on whatever we approve. So I do like where we've gone architectural controls. I do like the idea of a big box cap, a moratorium on especially out Edwards Boulevard. I'd love to see a big screeching halt out there and slow down on the growth. I do have a question because it's been thrown out kind of randomly that the city administrator and Jackie and Mike have said that we have enough housing for the next 800 years. And so I know I'm on Bonnie Bray Lane, I've got 5 empty lots across the street, but I do know that there's no will to develop those. I want to leave them like they are. I know Mr. Davila out on South Street's got opportunities to develop those. I don't know what Pancho's movement forward is, but those have been sitting empty for a long time. I'm talking about real buildable Symphony Bay up on the hill. Chaudine's hitting that. We've got phase 3 coming in on Summer Haven. Realistically, how many houses and how many opportunities do we have before all that's gone, especially in the market we're in right now? Do we have a number?
We haven't done an analysis. We could run an analysis on the number of undeveloped lots in the city. It wouldn't get to the level of what you described where you know that someone's not going to develop them and has no interest.
Yeah, I would really like to know what our real true inventory, not just this thing thrown out that we don't need any more housing. I would like to know really what, for future, how much do we need and how much is out there and what opportunities are there and do we have too much or not enough?
We'll probably get a
And
little.
can you have that in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're down here, by the way.
Jackie, I appreciate your your additional comments about residential development, that with typical density, 4 to 5 homes per acre, that sometimes that would be a net loss in tax revenues. I think with what Alderman Dunn mentioned, that, if we keep having this slow growth to accommodate more residential, we basically end up losing the small town feel while raising taxes on the local residents to pay for it. So they're basically paying for what they don't want.
Legally, it's very hard to stop it.
Yeah, is that right?
So the key is, and what Jackie alluded to is, part of our problem with conditional uses is that we don't really have restrictions. So instead, it's creating a zoning ordinance that addresses the nuisances that you're trying to prevent, and including those as standards within your zoning district, saying in order to, once you have the plan, and then your zoning, you have to conform with these restrictions.
So with the 2,000 acres we have designated right now for planned neighborhood or mixed use, and the possible numbers of growth that they could create, we really can't stop that right now unless we change the comprehensive plan.
For land within the city, the annexation creates a reasonable expectation of being able to develop what's not otherwise protected by environmental protections.
It'd be interesting to see those numbers between what's annexed and what's not. Especially if this is going to create a huge tax burden on existing residents.
Jim, I know that you said it's changed, and things do change. I mean, I had blonde hair at one time, now it's gray. So I still consider it a small town. This is 2019. Things do change. I just wanted to bring that up because it's not like it was when my dad owned a clothing store in 1980, 1979, 1976. So some of the things, I really have an issue with the boat launch, and I've had an issue with the boat launch for a long time, and I really think that we really need to look at that sooner than later. It's a problem.
Relocating?
Relocating, yeah, what else is there to do? I mean, we can't, I drive by there and I try and think of things, and I think of possibly seeing if we could, which I know we can't do, but it's just something that comes across, that possibly building out farther, providing parking or something. Look at Williams Bay, beautiful, beautiful area down there. Plenty of parking for boats, off the main drag. I'd like to see that for Lake Geneva. I hate to see it move out of town, because then it's not part of the city of Lake Geneva, but I think there's an issue there that we need to address, so. What?
I'd love to see it move to.
Okay, all right, well.
Spring Lake.
Lakeshore Drive, Bigfoot Beach, it's an issue. I drive by there quite often, and I've noticed that it's eroded more in the last few years than I've noticed in the past 10 years. So I think we need to address that as well. Infrastructure downtown, city sidewalks, do we have any plans as far as improving those? Those inlay bricks are all busted up, they look terrible. Is there anything that we're gonna do in the future as far as, I don't know, would that be you guys or anybody?
Well, I guess that'd be
It'd be Public Works
Okay,
Committee, so that's a valid point, but I don't believe it's part of the comprehensive plan process.
okay, all right, all right,
Downtown comment.
okay. The elephant in the room, housing. So part of my job is a commercial building inspector, and I oversee 6 counties in the southeast corridor of Wisconsin. And I've been in the building and construction. I've been a residential and commercial building inspector for about 14 years now. I went through the recession. I saw the recession. I saw what happened. I've seen the boom. Residential was big until about 2007, 2008. Then it took a dive, obviously we all know that. It started coming back about 2010. Commercial has taken off as well. But what I've seen a transition in, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, is high-end apartment buildings, and now tiny homes as well. There's a big talk in that. I'd like to see us look into that as well. There's two areas that I know of that have done high-end apartment buildings, underground parking. $1,400 to $2,100 a month for rent, some even higher than that. These places were being rented out before they were even completed. That seems to be what the millennials are wanting to do. Possibly something we could look at that would increase the density, correct? Because you're putting more people in a smaller area, right?
Right, at those 3-story apartment buildings with underbelly parking,
Yep.
50 units an acre on average.
Yep. Okay, and I thought I saw something that, in the last 2 years that about, I'm not gonna quote that because I wasn't sure. So I would like to have us, possibly look at that as future development, and maybe not so much single family, if we're worried about houses sitting. I don't see that right now. I mean, I know developers around the area and east of here that can't build the houses fast enough. And they're young couples. They're people in their 30s, their 20s, good high-paying jobs that are buying houses that are averaging $450,000. So I don't really see Lake Geneva as a ghost town in 10 years because we're overbuilding.
You do your best work.
I only have a couple of comments. I appreciate all the effort that my colleagues have put into reviewing this. It's impressive, and I appreciate all of it. I just want to make a couple of comments. We do have a park in our park and open space plan. We do have a requirement or an expectation that there's parks within, I think it's either a quarter or a half a mile from most residences. So we do have that. We might not be utilizing it totally, but we do have that requirement. Our bike and our pet plan implementation, we've tried to implement many times pieces of the bike and pet plan. It has not occurred. Okay, so that's not that it hasn't come up, it hasn't been approved by the park board, it hasn't moved forward, it just gets stopped. I thought there was a utility study that we did kind of recently, like in the last year, that talked about where utility was needed. Now you were referring to that, so we do have some more. We do have some current data on the utility, the strength of our utility facility related to any kind of growth, and that's a very recent study. When we talk about population of the 7,000-ish people that are in this town, which I do love, by the way, and I never ever thought I would love a smaller town than Chicago, and I love this town. But population includes children, and children really can't come, or shouldn't probably come, when there's a debate. So if 75 people were here, that might be a little bit more of a percentage than 1%. It might be higher because maybe out of 7,000 people's population, there might be 2,000 that are children, so maybe there's 5,000 that are adults. Just saying.
Can I comment?
Oh, if you choose to.
Roughly 26% of population in Lake Geneva is under 18, I do believe. So
Okay.
I kind of took those numbers and figured it out, and I was just.
Yeah. No, I also appreciate the public's involvement in this process. It's been phenomenal, whether we all are on the same page all the time or not. It's still been phenomenal.
Housing, been mentioned in the plan. I mean, that's a trendy thing in larger cities. We have some limitations because we have to have we require a certain number of parking spots, but I don't know if that's a viable thing. Mr. Mormon mentioned environmental issues, and he's accurate that we don't really know what this, any of us are going to be doing in 10 years, so that's a difficult thing to project. And I agree with Scott that we should have some more pointed, results-oriented verbiage.
All right, thank you for that. And there are places within the comprehensive plan for that sort of thing. It is a state mandated document, and so there are certain requirements that we must fulfill. I understand the point of being able to assess exactly what things are and what they cost, and metrics are very important in that. My comments are just a little bigger picture, not specifically about specific parcels, but I'm reminded every day that my world is not the world, that how I look at things is not how everybody looks at things. I've heard a number of times that we already have enough people. We don't, and the issue currently is that we don't have enough people to fill the current jobs that we have right here in town. We are using, even out at the Grand Geneva, they're using the J1 employees. They have to bring people in from other countries in order to fulfill job openings that they have. These are skilled workers. So if we don't have enough people, we need to figure out how to gain more people with more skills. In the document, it talks about our schools, and since 2014, we've lost 250 students. That suggests that people with children are moving out, not living here, going to other schools outside the district, any sort of things. But with those 250 students, we're losing state aid, and that's almost 8 teachers that we are losing. The number that was talked about in terms of people with housing burden, the 44% pay more than 30% of their income on housing. That suggests 2 things. One, that the employment of those people does not pay them enough to live in the houses or apartments that they live in. And perhaps that suggests that more skills are needed, and then that would be a gateway, that sort of thing. That's something that we ought to consider. Ironically, the council and I this is just an example of what's happening to our current housing. We were in a house at 930 Marshall Street waiting for the parade. That house in 2018, it's a 3-bedroom house, 2018 sold for $80,000. 2018, 3-bedroom house. Probably a family living there. It's now vacant because it's an Airbnb, which we all know is something that's eating up our housing. It's for sale for $250,000. That is happening all over our city. There's a resident who lives up on High Street, who said, not High Street, Ridge, who says that in the winter, she's the only person living in her house. All the other houses are vacant. Those are people who just come up during the summer. That's not a neighborhood. So those are the sorts of things I think we have to look at